How are you doing, Fred?
What's going on? Can you hear me?
I can hear you. Yeah, Fred, are you a believer?
I am. I'm an agnostic, but I lean towards believing in Christianity.
Sure. So, are when you say Christianity, do you think like the Trinitarian version of Christianity?
Yeah, I would say so. Yeah.
Cool. And what would be the best evidence or argument for why this is the case?
Well, I personally believe in the life and the teachings of Jesus, and I understand that you don't have to be a believer in Christianity to believe that those things can be accurate and his teachings be accurate in terms of his moral teachings and the wisdom that he had. But I do also, I'm maybe an outlier in that I don't believe that the Bible is a divine document. I don't believe it's infallible. I believe it was written by a man, and I also believe in evolution. I believe in the Big Bang. I believe in a lot of those things. But I also believe that Jesus lived, as I'm sure you do.
Sure. So, how do you know Jesus said the things that the Bible says he said?
I mean, I guess the same way that I believe that the Gettysburg Address was spoken by Abraham Lincoln. Same type of.
Right, but like if the Bible's fallible, if it says things that are
Sure.
untrue, I guess I would apply that to speeches that people give. When people give
Yeah.
speeches, like how do we know they actually said that?
Oh no, you don't. You can't. You can't know for sure. That's why I think faith is important.
Fair enough. When I was in high school, actually, I had the same question for my religion teacher. We had this probably the same conversation we're about to have now. She was Catholic, went to a Catholic high school, and I asked her about how we can evidentially demonstrate the Bible to be true, and she said you can't do it. This is a faith, not a fact. You just have to have faith. And I
Hmm.
said that's a fair answer.
Yeah, yep, and that's what I believe as well. I believe that faith is the most important part, and that's why actually I had a question for you. Are you a atheist or are you agnostic?
I'm an atheist. I used to be a Christian, and then I became agnostic, and now I'm full blown atheist.
Okay, so you don't believe in the possibility of a higher power.
I think there is like a logical higher power that could be possible that is
Okay.
more like a deistic, like something that just kicked everything into existence but isn't really participating in anything.
Hmm.
I think that is a possible deity, but at that point, if that's all there is, what do I care?
No, yeah, you shouldn't at that point.
Right? Like it doesn't
I
affect me if I believe in this thing, right?
well, sure, yeah, no, it wouldn't. So so I guess, and I haven't seen your channel before, so I'm not sure like your perspective on some of these things. But is your perspective like when your title is your God real, or sorry, your God isn't real? Are you referring to a specific God, or are you just referring to all gods in general?
I'm like referring typically to all formalized gods.
Okay.
But I will debate any god. It's my personal belief that if your god is not like a deist god, then I
Hmm.
think you can actually prove that god wrong pretty quick.
Okay. Okay. So you think that you can disprove the existence of all gods, all conscious and like nameable gods, I guess.
Yeah, like the god concepts that are we have in current society, I think all of those god concepts are wrong. If there is a god that exists, I don't think anyone is accurately describing that god or could even
Mhm.
fathom this god.
And is your criticism and your argument against Christianity that there are contradictions in the Bible and incorrect historical accounts and things like that?
I don't think that's the biggest thing. I think the biggest nail in the coffin for Christianity is that the Old Testament gives many, many predictions about the Messianic age. Not a single one
Hmm.
of them ever came true. And when the Bible tries to pigeonhole Jesus into fulfilling prophecies, they're just lying. They're just randomly grabbing out of context quotations from the Old Testament and calling it prophecy when typically it's not even close to a prophecy.
Hmm. Yeah, no, well, yeah, and I agree with you, and that's why I don't necessarily believe that everything in the Bible is to be taken literally, and or like I don't believe it was God breathed. I don't believe that God um, guided the hand of the author of each book and things like that. My perspective and the reason that I'm agnostic, leaning towards Christianity, is because I don't, I don't believe that I know more than a lot of really, really intelligent people that do and don't believe in Christianity or, Islam and any other religion. And I'm sure a lot of those are just based off of they were born into that, and there's many reasons that people choose to believe in. But there are, I'm sure, some people that are a lot smarter than me that believe in Christianity and will be able to debate me on it. But I guess my thought was always, if the story of Jesus's crucifixion, and him coming down as a man and experiencing pain as man, and him dying on a cross and suffering the pain that he did for us, if that were true, I would feel like a scumbag if I didn't give him, my thanks and my due, what I am due to him for
Well,
having done that for us.
I understand that. I get that. That's something that I would have understood when I was a Christian. But let me ask you a question. Why did he need to die in the first place? That's a silly thing. Like, so
Mhm.
if you and I are going for a walk, right? In this scenario, you and I are good friends, right? If you and
Mhm.
I are going for a walk, and I just jump in the road, in front of a car, and then I get laid up in the hospital. I'm like, I jumped in front of that car for you. Now you owe me. Like, you didn't. I didn't need to jump in front of that car. I just chose
Well,
to do it.
that is true. I guess from the perspective of a Christian, I guess they would say that we are all sinners, and just by nature are evil. Or I guess not by nature. I don't. It's tough to
No, you had it
to.
right. Romans chapter 6 and 7 says that we have the sin nature.
Okay, so we have a nature. Yeah, I'm not a super. I'm not a Bible expert, but if we are evil by nature, then the punishment, I guess, like just logically speaking, like if A is true, you know what I mean. I'm not saying that this is the case. I'm just saying if it's the case, like if it is true that we are all evil and we are all sinners by nature, and the rightful punishment for that is I guess hell or
Can you
permanent
define why
separation.
hell would be the rightful punishment? You're just assuming that hell is the rightful punishment, but I don't see why it would
Right.
be.
That's a good point. And well, what do you think would be the rightful punishment in that case, if A were true? You know what I mean?
Well, all right, let's imagine, for example, we'll start from the beginning. So we have a sin nature according to the Bible.
Hmm.
No man can live up to the glory of God. Every man has sinned
Hmm.
and fallen short of the glory of God, it says. So every human being that has ever lived is going to sin eventually because we're human beings. We have this the nature about us, right? So
Hmm.
we're doing the thing that God designed us to do. He designed humans, he designed the sin nature, he designed this whole system. He knew that we were going to sin, and every human being couldn't get out of it. So the next question is, well, what should the consequence of that be? Well, I think the consequence of that thing should probably be that I don't know, if you did something bad, maybe you should pay a penalty for it, but I don't think that penalty should ever be torture, right? So, like,
No, I agree.
to me, I think it's perfectly fair to say, listen, well, if you did a bunch of bad stuff while you were alive, you're going to get a little bit of punishment in the afterlife. But I
Sure.
certainly wouldn't think that the punishment is eternal. And I certainly wouldn't
Hmm.
think that the punishment is going to be torture. And I
Hmm.
also don't think that you should be punished for being a non-believer, that's the
Hmm.
real heinous thing about the gospel,
Yeah.
is that it doesn't matter if you only committed one sin in your entire life and then you died an unbeliever, you go to hell. That's silly.
Hmm. Yeah. No, I agree with that, and that's always been my biggest issue is that non-believers go to hell. And again, like, so my I guess, not because I also don't like to create cop outs. You know what I mean? I don't want to create them. I'm trying to look at it from at least a somewhat reasonable perspective. And I guess my answer to that was always that I don't necessarily believe that non-believers go to hell if you don't believe in Christ, because I think that I think that God knows what's in your heart. You know what I mean? And I know that, like, for somebody, like, I know people who, like, and I don't mean to say this about Christians, because I might consider myself one, and I know many intelligent Christians, but a lot of Christians are, not, and this goes for atheists and every other religion too, but there are some unintelligent Christians, and it's easy for them to believe in God. It's easy for them to not be critical thinkers, and it's easy for them to just accept it. You know what I mean? So maybe if they were more in tune with things like science and physics and quantum mechanics and things like that, maybe they would say, "Huh, well, this is I couldn't have comprehended that before I had this knowledge, but now that I do, now I don't believe in God." And I think that God is aware, would be aware if he existed, would be aware of what's truly in people's hearts, and given certain information, what they would what they would choose in the long run. You know what I mean? Like, given if everybody was given the same amount of information, who would believe and who wouldn't? I don't know. That's just my kind of like way of seeing it.
I understand what you're saying, but let me ask you a question.
Okay.
Is it possible that there's a God and it's not the God of the Bible?
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. Why then are we trying to hang on to this idea that it's the Bible God?
Well, kind of like I said earlier, like I think that we have evidence for Jesus' existence. Most even atheist historians believe that Jesus existed and was crucified under Pontius Pilate. But
Sure.
um, so I think if God exists and it's some sort of tangible deity that we can name, if it is one of those deities, I think it makes most sense to be the Christian God as opposed to Islam or Buddhism, where there was a historical figure that claimed to be God. Whether his claim was true or not is up for debate, obviously. But if one of the tangible, I use the word tangible, I don't know if it's the right word, but I think you know what I'm saying. Like, if I'm going to assign one of those mainline religions um, to be the true one, I think it makes most sense that it would be the Christian religion, even though I do believe that the Bible is not perfect. I believe it's infallible. Or not infallible, sorry.
Because I don't really understand why we're just picking the Christian religion, because there's lots of religions that have deities that were tangible and on the earth. In fact, most of the Roman Caesars, at least the 12 that Suetonius wrote about, had the good ones that had their ancestry traced back to the gods.
Yeah. Well, they had their ancestries traced back to the gods. What
Mhm.
does that mean?
Yeah, so I mean, the gods in Greco-Roman mythology were real entities that actually
Hmm.
had copulated with women and created offspring,
Hmm.
right? So, like
Okay.
in the Roman culture, like these emperors were partly divine.
Um, I'm I'm sorry. Can you name one? I'm not really sure. I don't really know this. I'm not educated on this.
Like Vespasian or Julius or which
And these are
Nero?
gods, and Nero, for example. You're saying Nero is a claim to be divine?
No, Nero didn't claim to be divine. I'm just naming some of the emperors, but the fact of the matter is, the emperors, not only some of them were claimed to have lineage that went back to one of the deities, but they were deified after their death.
Are you saying that anybody can claim to be a deity, and in the future anybody can claim that somebody in the past was a deity, and if you can kind of connect just enough dots, you can make the claim? Is that what you're saying?
Well, what I'm saying is, I don't think that Christianity is unique in that the deity manifested on the earth.
No, no, no. Well, that's not my main point. I think that because like what you said, right? So your point, well, not your point, but what you said earlier is that we can't know for sure that what Jesus did and said are true because just like we have to be critical of all things that are written from history. Um, but my point is that I think that if those things, and I'm not, it's kind of sounds like circular reasoning, I guess, but my point kind of is like Jesus's life in particular strikes me as unique in its wisdom and its in what it taught and how he lived. And if those words are true, I think it speaks to me more than if anything else, any of these Roman emperors were true. Also, not to mention the other people from those times believed it was he was God as well.
Well, I don't
So
think
it's not.
we have any evidence of that. But I do know that everything Jesus taught was found elsewhere. Like we can find almost all of his teachings, like in the Talmud. Like the writings in the Talmud are bar for bar a lot of what Jesus taught, and he quotes
Didn't
from
the Talmud come after Jesus?
the Talmud spanned about 700 years worth of time. Some of the Talmud came prior to Jesus, and some of it came after.
And are you referring to parts that are the same as Jesus, as those parts came before or after Jesus? Like what parts specifically are you referring to?
Both.
No, no, no.
What
I'm
I'm
saying like
suggesting
what
is
does
that the teachings of Jesus show up in the Talmud both before he existed and contemporaneous to his existence. So people living at the same time as Jesus were saying the same things Jesus was saying. Like I don't think he didn't live in a vacuum.
no, I don't think that he did.
right? So like even when he
I,
says it is easier for a camel to go through the eye of the needle than for a rich man to go into heaven, well, that quote is contemporaneous. So other people had said that before Jesus.
yeah, sure. I mean, I think a lot of like I don't know, like for example, render unto Caesar what is Caesar's, and render unto God what is God's. I find that to be particularly wise and interesting, thought
I don't
provoking.
find Jesus to be all that wise. Like when I
Really?
read the rest of the writings from the ancient Near East and from the Jewish people and the Romans and whatnot, like there's a lot of good proverbs even from Egypt
Hmm.
that I think are every bit as good as anything Jesus ever said. Jesus
Okay.
advocated for stoning rebellious children in Mark chapter 7.
Did he?
Yeah. He
What did he
chastised
say?
the Well, he chastised the Pharisees because they created a law that invalidated the law of Moses, saying that you need to execute the child that curses their father and mother.
Oh, okay, interesting. I didn't know about that. I'll have to. What was that? Mark chapter 7.
Yeah, Mark chapter 7, he does that. And then
Okay,
in
I'll
Mark
look into
chapter
that.
16 and Mark chapter 24, he predicts his second coming and then never does.
He predicts his second coming to be within a certain time frame.
Yeah,
In what time frame? When did he say it would come?
before all of his disciples died. I can read you the passage real quick.
Yeah, no, no. Actually, I'm curious. Sure.
Yeah. It says, the Son of Man is to come with his angels in the glory of his Father, and then he will repay everybody for what has been done. Truly I tell you, there are some standing here who will not taste death before they see the Son of Man coming in his kingdom.
Before they see the Son of Man coming in His kingdom. That
But
references the second coming.
yep.
Coming in His kingdom.
Yep. When he comes with the
Is the
angels in
earth
the
is
glory of the Father, that's the second coming.
okay?
That's Mark 20 or Matthew 25. He describes it as well. Go to 31. It says, when the Son of Man comes in his glory with all the angels with him, then he will sit on the throne of his glory, and all the nations will be gathered before him, and he will separate people one from another as a shepherd separates the sheep from the goats. And then you know what
Okay.
he does. Some go to paradise and some go to hell.
Hmm.
So
Okay.
this
Yeah. I
is
mean
the second
that's
coming.
yeah. No, that's a fair criticism. But to answer your and yeah, I can't argue against that. I don't have the and maybe there's no argument against that. I don't know.
There's not a
But
good one. I've heard them all.
okay, fair enough. But to answer your previous question more, I guess about why, because we were talking about, well, why do you think that Jesus is more like, why do I think Jesus is valid? And you asked me that, and I gave my reason, my opinion on why I think this is valid, and you were kind of saying that you don't think he's as wise, but um, I I I guess that doesn't necessarily to me mean anything. That I think he was wise. You might not. I guess none of that necessarily points to his existence as having been divine. So I guess if I was going to give a more tangible reason why he is more valid than like some of the other deities that you were saying, that you were mentioning that came down in human form, um, I guess like just the main things are people like whoever, well, like Peter. I don't even know, some of these guys who were like crucified for his sake and died for the belief of Christ, and were
Yeah.
persecuted for belief in Christ,
Peter
who
being
walked with
crucified
him.
upside down.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Why do you believe that happened?
Kind of like I said before, same reason I believe that the Gettysburg Address was written by Abraham Lincoln, all that stuff.
The book that we have, the Apocryphal Acts of Peter, is where we learn that he was crucified upside down. That's a second century text.
Okay.
Um, it also says that a dog was given the power to speak, and the dog gives a speech, and then a nursing child at her mother's hoo-ha gives a speech in that same narrative. I'm not inclined to believe anything in that narrative is true when it includes talking babies and dogs.
Yeah, and not that you should, but would you? It's a weird question, but could you be wrong? Like, is it fathomable that you're wrong?
I could be wrong about anything. I all I'm saying is that when I'm like looking at claims, I'm just
Mhm.
examining which claims are likely to be true, and I certainly don't think that
Absolutely.
the claims of the Bible are true because the ones that we can test, they keep failing over and over again.
Which ones can we test?
like all the prophecies. Prophecies are
Oh, I
testable
see.
according to Deuteronomy 18. And according to Deuteronomy 18, you only need to make one false prophecy before you're a false prophet
Yeah,
and you
that's
get executed.
yeah, that's true. That is true. But the reason I ask that, like, can you be wrong, is just because it kind of like goes circles back to what we said earlier about faith being the main driver and why I choose to, or why anybody chooses to believe or not to believe in something. Um, and so I would almost be inclined to flip it around and say, is it not, the words of the Bible are a lot easier. And I'm not going to say like the Quran and the Bible, like those things you can have a lot more to say about. But between atheism and theism in general, why is atheism more, why do you think atheism is more valid than theism?
Well, atheism isn't a thing that has like it needs to be proven. It's just a lack of belief in the God. And I think when you believe in things, you should have evidence that would lead you to believe in it. Otherwise, you shouldn't believe in it. So
Well, I actually would disagree because I would say that you believe that everything needs to be created, and I guess unless you believe that the universe is eternal.
I do. Yep.
Okay, so you believe that what's your evidence for that? Because that's a positive claim that you're making. Like, you were making the
Can
claim
matter
that
be
you don't
created
have
or
to.
destroyed?
No.
Okay, so it's always been here.
Well, I mean,
It's just logically
can
true. Can
well
something
that
come
you
from
sure that's
nothing?
no, of course not.
And there's never been nothing.
So what was the Big Bang?
The Big Bang was just an expansion event. It wasn't the creation of all matter.
Can you? So you're using the laws of Newton to prove that the universe always existed.
Well, they didn't have anything to do with Newton. I understand what you're getting at, though. I'm using
Conservation of mass is
science.
Newton. Newton is the law of conservation of mass and energy.
Did he come up with conservation of mass?
Yeah,
I could be wrong on that one.
I thought he did, but okay, maybe not. Maybe he did. I thought he did, but either way, the point is that like, okay, let me ask you this: Do you know this for
Conservation
a
of
fact?
mass came from Anton Lavoisier. I think he's French.
Lavoisier?
Yeah.
Oh, never heard of him. Interesting. I always thought Newton was the maybe he's aerodynamics, thermodynamics. I don't know.
No. Newton came up with the idea that an object in motion will remain
Oh,
in
that's what it is.
motion until acted upon by an outside force. And I
Yeah,
don't
that's laws of aerodynamics, right?
I
Or
don't
something
know
like
what
that.
they call that. I forget the name of it. I think it's conservation of something, but it's not the conversation. It's not the.
Energy, maybe.
It could be
Yeah, it sounds like energy, I guess. Well, either way,
momentum. There we go. Thank you, Space Monkey.
there it is.
Conservation of
Yes.
momentum. There we go. We'll get there eventually.
Yeah, but so you think that the universe is eternal?
Yeah. Why would I think anything else?
Well, if I mean, is there not a large debate over whether or not the Big Bang was the beginning of the universe?
No, there was like 100 years ago.
So it's you think it's 100% proven that the universe is eternal?
No, I never made that claim. I'm saying that the evidence suggests that it is, though. Like, what would be the evidence that there was once nothing?
I mean, I don't know. I wasn't there.
Right, exactly. The evidence that we know is that matter cannot be created nor destroyed, and that we can't get something from nothing. And therefore, it's
Mm.
logical to conclude that the something that exists has always existed. I mean, you already believe that to be the case. You believe that your God always existed, but your God doesn't have a cause.
True, but I also believe that God exists outside the confines of space and time.
You can't exist outside of space. Outside
I
denotes
can't.
no. Outside is a space connotation.
I know what you're saying.
Outside is a location.
So then the universe has to be infinite,
I agree. Yeah, the universe is infinite.
or well, according to that logic, according to the logic. So, in other words, there's no edge of the universe. And what if
I
there
don't think there
was?
is. No.
But what if there was?
I don't know. Well, we'll never
You don't
find
know?
it. We're not
No,
at
of
the
course we won't
edge.
find it. No, we can't travel the speed of
Right.
light. Anything with mass can't. But the point is that these are the whole point that I guess I'm trying to make is that it's a claiming, I guess, saying that you believe that the universe is infinite, although logical. I don't think it's any necessarily more logical to say that the that there is a deity or just an entity responsible for its existence.
I think it's much more probable because what I'm saying is the stuff that you can see with your eyeballs, the stuff
Hmm.
that you can touch, the stuff that you can measure, that stuff has always existed in some form or another. That's a
Hmm.
very logical conclusion. Then there's this imaginary being that is it's a mind, but it doesn't have a brain. It doesn't take up any space, but it still exists. It exists outside of time, which means it never existed for any amount of time, but and then somehow it created all things, but also it can like hear us pray, according to the Bible, even though sound waves can't travel through space.
Well, I mean that. I guess you can chalk that last part up to just God, but um, the I guess the point really is like God. How do I word this? How do I phrase it? Like,
Well, here's the deal. Listen, if you
sure,
believe in a God, that I think you and I both know that your belief in a God is a matter of faith and not a matter of evidence, and I'm fine with
yeah,
that.
yeah.
What I'm not fine with is I think you should dump the Bible. I think you should continue believing in your God because you sound like a good guy. But the God of the Bible is a vicious monster. He says that you
Hmm.
are going to marry your rapist. He says that you can kidnap women and children in war. He says that you can own slaves permanently. He says that women are lesser than men. This is not a good God. I think the God that you're thinking of in your head is better than the God in this book.
Yeah, that's likely. That sounds a lot of Old Testament stuff, though.
Is Jesus God?
Yeah,
Then he's the God of the Old Testament.
yeah. I've had that thought. And yeah, a lot of that. Again, like I'm not a Bible scholar, and what you're saying, I do take to heart, and I do want to understand it, and I want to research that kind of thing because obviously, like, I consider myself to be somebody who just wants to know the truth rather than to just believe in something.
I get
Um,
that. I think you are.
and and yeah, and so I'd like to, really dive into those things because I don't want to be critical of something that I don't know anything about. And like I said, like faith is important in these types of things. So it's easier to have faith without knowledge, unfortunately, and that's what creates a lot of these people who aren't really critically thinking on the subject.
Yeah. I think
But
the more knowledge you gain, the harder it is to have faith in these deity concepts. But anyways, listen, we've talked for a while. I appreciate you giving me a
yeah,
lot of your time. I'm going to move on to the next guest. But
yeah, absolutely.
listen, your God is probably as delightful as you are. Just dump the book. You don't need the book.
Okay, I appreciate it.
All right. Have a good one.